All right, if y'all come on in and get a seat, and let's go ahead and get set down and get these young men up here. We got Carter and Alexander, and then Carter. I'm sorry, Carter and Andrew. My bad, guys. And then we'll have Mac lead our invitation song. Okay, come on, guys. Y'all ready? Okay.
$5.48. The lily of the valley.
First verse. I have found
A friend in Jesus, he's everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He's a lily of the valley. All of my sins are great holy roll. And so he's my comfort. To my soul. We'll be singing 10,000 Angels, 349, 349.
Chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. We're going to read a few verses here. Pretty familiar passage. Mark 12, we're going to read verses 41 and following. It says, Now Jesus sat opposite the treasury and saw how the people put money into the treasury, and many who were rich put in much. Then one poor widow came and threw in 2 mites, which make a penny. So he called his disciples to himself and said to them, Assuredly, I say to you, that this poor widow has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury. For they all put in out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had, her whole livelihood. We talk about this passage quite often, usually when we have a big opportunity to give coming up or something like that. You know, we give cheerfully. We talk about this where it's all about the way that we give. And we apply it in all kinds of ways financially, and those are all good and right, and I appreciate all those. But what I want to look at tonight is not so much a financial giving, but a giving of our time. Something that I feel like we don't talk about enough is how much time are we giving to God? We come together every week on Sunday morning for Bible class, then we have worship Sunday night, Wednesday night, we're all here. And, you know, that's 4 hours a week. We have 168 hours a week. 168. and we spend 4 in this building, fellowshipping with other Christians, learning from God's word, worshiping God. And I'm not saying we don't do things at home. I'm not saying we don't do things together. But what I do want to think about is how much of our time are we intentionally pushing forward to give to God? Are we just giving out of our abundance of time? Out of our 168 hours, we say, yeah, at the end of all this, I've spent my 164. Here you go, God. Here's 4. Are we just giving that little bit? Are we giving everything we've got? Are we really pushing ourselves to give time to God? One thing that we talked about last week, Glenn was talking about how evil company corrupts good morals, right? When we have free time and we're not at work, we're not taking care of the kids, we're not, whatever it may be, our busy things, we're not doing any of those. When we have some free time, are we out hanging out with our Christian friends or our non-Christian friends? Are we hanging out by ourselves? Are we hunting? Right now, it's open season. So are we out hunting? Are we by ourselves? Or are we devoting time to God? So one thing that I want us to do is I want us to take some time and I want to think about how we are intentionally spending our time. It's a resource. Are we intentionally giving time to God and saying, I've got my 164. I'm busy as everything. I am packed full. We a lot of times compare ourselves to the widow, and we say, I've gave him my last 4 hours. I gave him my last 4 hours, right? But something that I like to talk about, I don't know who in here knows anything about gardening or fruit trees specifically, but do you know that a fruit tree is best when you plant the fruit tree, you let it grow, and usually it takes 3 to 5 years to put off fruit. It's a long time. The first year, you've spent 3 to 5 years waiting on fruit to come out of this tree. And the first year, the best way to get a good fruit tree is to take all the fruit off, prune it all off before it gets big, and throw it away. Seems kind of disappointing, right? We go back in the Bible and we look at all these examples of people giving the first fruits to God. So what's the point of throwing away that first fruit on that tree? It makes the tree stronger. See, all the nutrients that are going to go into the tree go into that fruit instead, and it grows a big, nice, ripe fruit that first year. But the tree doesn't grow as big. The tree doesn't grow as strong. And the second year and third year and fourth year that it's putting off fruit, it's still trying to play catch up. But if you give the first fruits, you get rid of the first fruits, then the tree's stronger, and it has more to give year after year after year. And so when we think about ourselves and our time, if we give God that last 4 hours, we give him that last 4, and we say, all right, this is all I've got left to give. Here's my 4 hours. Our tree is weak. Our tree fails. But if we give him the first fruits, if we give him those 4 hours, and then we say, hey, I have another hour that I can spend, and another hour, and another hour, and you start growing that on the front end, you start using that empty time to fill with God, your tree becomes strong. Your faith becomes strong. And the stronger you are, the more fruit you produce. The more your time management will get better. And so I want us to think about that. I really want us to put some time in this week and think about how we're spending our time. Are we like the widow? Are we giving everything we've got? Or are we like the rich, giving those 4 hours out of our 168? If you have any need tonight, we're going to sing an invitation song. And what was that number? 313. We're going to sing an invitation song. You can come forward and we'll pray with you and for you.
We'll sing the first and fourth verses. Let us sing. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the
Welcome to the East Walker Church of Christ. It is good to see each of you here. Looks like we've got a good number with us tonight, so glad for that. If you're visiting with us, we're honored you chose to be with us tonight. We've got a few on our prayer list that we need to keep in mind. First of all, Tommy Holly is down in Texas. They have been running tests for the last day or so, and they are going to be beginning his surgery Friday. That's correct, so be prayerful and mindful of him, their family, the doctors, the nurses, all of them that will be involved in that. We also need to keep Leah Farley in our prayers. This is Bonnie's cousin. She did have a blockage. I think they said it was 90%, so they're going to be taking steps to address that. So we hopefully will have an address or a room number for her if anybody would like to send her cards. Do we have any others that we need to add to our prayer list? Updates to those who are on it? All right. By way of announcements, if you've noticed out in the foyer in the front, there is an empty box. Our plan is to fill it, right? We're going to be having a service project for Veterans Day that's coming up. It will be, what's the date for that? November 10th. Is that right? One of my kids drew on it, so I'm not 100%, but sometime in November, so be thinking of that. We'll be collecting word search books, lotion, chapsticks, and I guess little candies and cakes and stuff like that. So let's see how many times we can fill the box up and have to empty it. Also, this coming Sunday night, we'll be having our trunk or treat. So all of us adults, make sure we run by Walmart and pick up some candy and have at least some semblance of giving them something at the end. Kids, y'all make sure to show up, bring your friends, bring your candy baskets, and we'll make sure to fill them up. Tamela, you and I will make sure that any candy that's left at the end of the night won't go to waste. So. Also, after that, we'll be having a game night. I think 10 o'clock is when they're going to be wrapping that up. So older kids, parents, be aware of that as well. All right. Anything else before we get started tonight? Yes, sir.
November 3rd, we're having a meeting for exposure. So all adults and kids who are going, we're going to meet in the fellowship hall after the morning service, November 3rd.
All right. So November 3rd, meeting for exposure. Anything else? All right, if you would, let's bow our heads and we'll have a word of prayer. Our dear loving and righteous and almighty Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight thankful for this place and this time that we can gather together and strive to learn about you and to worship you and honor you in a small way in our life. Help us to, like Austin said, take the moments of our life and give it to you, not just the crumbs, but help us to put you first in our life. We ask you to be with each of us as we study and as we learn tonight, that we'll apply these things to our lives and seek to follow after you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Classes can take their places now. Hey, where y'all going? What y'all doing? Hey, you gonna go to class? Hey, Timmy, you take them to class?
I like that shirt. Not your shirt. Not your shirt or your other shirt. It's full of.
You said, you know that lady that Jenny. You know. So, Morgan. I'm not teaching, I'm just greeting. Good. Missed y'all Sunday. Wish y'all had a better trip. I appreciate that phone, man. No problem.
My water bottle disappeared on me. That's 457 in mine. Book of Ecclesiastes. All right. I have that we ended up kind of at the end of chapter 7, beginning of chapter 8. Does that sound right to everybody? Or at least a good enough place to start again? All right. Again, we have this thought in Ecclesiastes, this reoccurring idea that it's all vanity, right? Like we said, the joke I'm going to keep using is, how many of you had a meal today? How many are you going to have to eat tomorrow? All right. Is the joke getting old, or is it at least settling in what I'm going to say at this point? You know it's coming next week, but guess what? It still fits, right? It's vanity. It's the same thing, but it still fits, right? This world that we live in, this physical sun that we live under, this earth that we walk upon, we're going to have troubles. We're going to have difficulties. We're going to have to deal with working and eating and taking care of our physical bodies. It's all vanity. But does that mean we can't find fulfillment and joy in this life that we live? No, it's the exact opposite of that. We can find those things knowing that it's vanity, because we know this world isn't the end, that we're working and building towards something better and towards something greater. All right, let's look at the last verse in chapter 7. So Ecclesiastes chapter 7. I was wrong. It's 852 in mine, Ryan. Page 852 in mine. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29. It says, "See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they sought out many schemes." Now, this is in relation to him talking about how, he's been able to find a righteous man, but he's unable to find a righteous woman. Now, again, I'm going to go to the idea of which women were surrounding him. We talked about how he had the, wives and concubines. Where were they mostly from? It would be say it again. They would be some other religion, right? Some pagan nationality. But these would be the daughters, the sisters, the family members of other nations. So they're pagans, they're from different nations, different religions, and they're probably just scheming for, get the biggest chunk or a piece of the pie for the family back home, right? So again, I think that's kind of what's influencing this decision or this mindset here. But the point is, where does righteousness come from? Where is righteousness found? Who defines whether a person or an individual is righteous? Somebody said it. God does, right? It's not me. It's not us deciding, hey, we're going to say this is the righteous way to live. This is the righteous thing to do. It's us saying God's decided. And I think that's the intent with what is being told here in the last part of chapter 7. It's that, there's so many people in this world that declare themselves to be righteous and honest and upright, but most of them aren't. And that's because most of them aren't founded upon a foundation that will last, a characteristic and a mindset that says, even in the face of death, I'm going to keep doing what God says. All right, let's move into chapter 8 now. Verse 1. Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face to shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. All right, anybody got a clue what that means? Or an interpretation to give us for it? All right, who is like the wise? Who knows the interpretation of a thing? The idea is people are always trying to figure out how things work, right? You think about how society and technology and mathematics and, it's been built upon, and we are just curious by nature. We try to figure out how these things put together, but a man's wisdom makes his face to shine. Have you ever met somebody who knew everything? Who at least they thought they were wise? How did they carry themselves? what is the air that a person like that gives off? I'm better than you. You got to come to me for the answer. There's no other knowledge that, unless I know it, or you might know things, but I know more things. Right? Who is like the wise? Who knows a thing? The hardness of his face is changed. Anybody have a different translation for that? It says something, uses a different word for hardness. Sternness, boldness. All right, Kim's not here, so none of you tell her this, all right? Because, I can't deny it, but I'll duck the question. I can vividly remember, I don't even remember what the argument or the discussion we were having was about. But whatever it was, she said something, and in my mind, it just clicked that I was wrong. And I said, she was right. My face changed a little bit. Now, I don't think it's necessarily a visible thing that it's talking about, but I think this is the mindset, the understanding that comes from it. When we know we're right or we know we're wrong, what does that cause us to do? When I found out I was wrong in that conversation, I'm going to say that I apologized just because I think that's what I did. I hope so. If not, tell her and you can include this in it. But what does us realizing we are wrong, what should that do to us or cause us to do? All right, take a step back, and then what's the thought with that? I take the step back and do what? Whatever's needed to fix the situation. Maybe that's me apologizing to somebody. Maybe that's me changing some kind of action that I'm doing, or maybe something that I believe or I'm teaching. I've got to change whatever the thing is. Who's like the wise? All right, and this is just kind of a sidestep from the main issue that he's going into now. All right, verse 2 says, I say, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. Now, he could be talking about himself here in this general sense of that you need to keep the command of the king because, God's put me in charge. Or he could be saying in general, we should respect those who are in positions of authority because who allows them to remain there? Who lets our government remain in power? It's not our military, even though, they've got their part to play. It's not our politicians, even though they might seem to work against it at times. But it's God, right? He's the one that's in charge. He's the one that's in control. So, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. So, I think it's the idea of respecting the position that those that are over us play. Verse 3. Be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of a king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? All right, so here's the question. Who can say to the king, what are you doing? What's the answer to that question? Somebody? Especially in this time frame, right? Again, I think we mentioned Esther before about, what was the fear for her coming before the king? What could have the king done? I don't like that you have disrespected me by coming before me, so get rid of it. All right? So who can say to the king, you need to stop doing this. You don't need to act that way. So look at verse 2 again. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. Does our government do some things that we consider immoral and sinful? I think that can be said about any government. I think every man-made system has its flaws and problems, right? Whether you go to communism, whether you go to our country, whether you go down to South America or Asian countries, whatever it is, there are flaws in it. So what do you and I do? What is the wisdom here? How do we act? We still continue to do and live and act in the ways that we should. Look at verse 5 and 6. Whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there is a time and a way for everything, although man's troubles lie heavy on him. Now, my mind goes to the idea that we're going to face troubles and difficulties in this life, right? That's kind of been a regular theme in this book. Life happens. We have to learn to deal with it, or we have to deal with it as God would want us to deal with it. All right, so the man's trouble lies heavy on him. There is a way and a time for everything. All right, so there's a time and a place where we can stand up and fight against the evils around us, right? And then there's a time and a place maybe where we should just maybe keep our mouth shut and make sure that we're able to keep teaching and preaching to the lost. I think this is the idea. We can stand on soapboxes so much that Jesus is lost. Should we be speaking out vocally against the idea that abortion's wrong and doing whatever we can actively to try to change those laws in our government? I believe so. But does that mean I shouldn't pay my taxes because of that? All right, so where do we take our stand? How do we do that? The idea is God is in control, remember? God is the one that's put these kings or allowed these governments to be in these positions. There is a way and a place and a manner that we can live justly and rightly under this system. Again, that might mean we have to speak out against it. That might mean, like the first century, we have to put our lives on the line. But again, it also might mean we say, well, that's just not a battle we're going to fight right now because we're busy fighting something else that is going to save souls. Again, something that might be a worthwhile and a battle to fight, but again, go to verse 6 there, for there is a time and a way for everything. There's a time to fight certain battles and a time to stop and a time to focus on other things. On things that don't really matter, right? We let those things slide, and I think I was talking to somebody about that very same thing. But again, the purpose is we're trying to bring them up, instill them, make them the best that we can, and we've got to realize God's in control of this world, right? Wisdom of the King. We do what we can, but we don't make our whole life about fighting the government. What was Jesus' purpose for coming? What did he, specifically one phrase I'm looking for, he came to seek. Did he come to fight the government? Now, did he end up fighting them in various ways? Yes, depending on how you describe that, but that wasn't the sole purpose. So again, we can fight some of these battles, and some of them are needed, and some of them are, us standing in the gap and being the salt of the earth, but some of them are just, I think, just wastes of time that Satan puts in our life to keep us away from focusing on the souls that need saving. All right, thoughts or comments here with this part down to verse 6 so far? All right, let's start with verse 7. It says, "For he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? No man has the power to retain the spirit or the power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it." All right, so these few verses, what can we as human beings do against the world? All right, let's look at the one in verse 8 there. There is no discharge from war. If your nation is under attack and a draft happens, what will the men of fighting age most likely have to do? They'll have to go to war, right? Now, thankfully, I haven't lived under that. I'm not going to assume ages in this class, but some of you might have seen that or seen your parents go through that, or in whichever age you are. But we understand if a nation is fighting for its life, right? Men aren't going to be able to escape this. Now, again, in general, look at the war in Ukraine or the war in Russia. Didn't we see a lot of people fleeing those wars? Some might escape, but generally speaking, you're not going to be able to escape this, right? As much as we might want to stop those things, I by myself can't cause these huge wars to end themselves, right? So I think, say it again.
No one is discharged in time of war, so wickedness will not release those who practice it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the last part or the second half that you read there, verse 8, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. So if I give myself in this fight for the world, or maybe we use it again, the writer's word here, the vanity of the world. If I give myself over to that, what good have I done here on this world? If I spend all my time fighting against the government, or if I use all my time fighting against this injustice or that injustice, but I don't ever try to save a soul. Again, there are some good fights and battles that need to be fought in our world, right? But Jesus' mission was to seek and to save the lost, and that's what we need to be doing as well. All right, so again, this idea, I don't know how we got there from this, but keep the command of the king here. End of verse 9, excuse me. All this observe while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his own hurt. Again, here is this great king that's saying, I've looked at all of it. I've searched these things out. I've observed and applied. Now what? He said, I've looked at all of this, and God is still in control. I think that's the idea there. Men fight, and we rage against things, but it's still God is the one that tips the scales, right? I always remember, I think it's Acts chapter 5, verse 29. If God can be for us, who can be against us? Is that right? I think that's right. Where they were standing, these two men were standing preaching about Jesus, and then they were brought in front of this Jewish council. And they essentially said, we're on God's side. We ought to obey God rather than men. That's the phrase I was trying to think of. Who do we listen to? Who's our king? What is the wisdom of the king's command? I think for us, again, it's this idea that God's in control no matter what's going on. All right, let's start with verse 10 now. It says, and then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out in the holy place, and were praised in the day because they had done such things. This is also vanity. How many monuments are there to people that have existed in the past? No, that's not an answerable question, but think about how many streets are named after people, and then after a decade or more, that street name's changed to somebody else's name, or statues put on one corner, and then maybe 300 or 400 years that one's moved and somebody else's is placed there. People are looking for glory and honor quite often, or at least a lot of people in our world are. But I saw these wicked buried, but they were the ones that were going in and out of these places. They were the ones that were trying to be seen. They were the ones that were trying to make their name last, to get their glory from this life. But notice what's said, verse 11. This is also vanity, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily. The heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does an evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God. He's saying here are these people that They've gone in and out of the holy places. They've been the ones that have their plaques on buildings. They're the ones that donate all of these sums of money to great causes, or at least that's how we're looking at it with the application now. They're the ones that the world looks at and says, aren't they great? But this is also vanity, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily. How many people in positions of power have sinned openly? You know, maybe look at Hollywood, maybe look at politics, maybe look at businesses. How many of them have, cheated on their spouses, have stolen from their businesses or what they're in charge of? But justice isn't executed speedily, right? How often, again, doesn't matter which party you're looking at, how often does somebody commit a crime, steal money or take a bribe or do something, and then somehow it's just swept under the rug? Well, I mean, it's not executed speedily, right? So we have become cynical, right? So what do we expect? Or what do we think? Well, it's just not going to happen. Yeah, they're going to catch him, but they're just going to let him go, or he'll get a slap on the wrist. And so look at it again. Because the sentence against evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of children of man is fully set to do evil. Because everybody else is doing it, what am I going to do? Or because everybody else is getting away with it, what might I be influenced to do? How many television shows usually have a premise with the idea that you have the one really corrupted cop or lawyer or businessman, and then they bring in some naive person and he gets trapped up in it and gets carried along and usually goes along with it, or that's how it works, right? We can become hardened to the idea, well, nobody's doing anything about the evil, the sin that we see in the world. But again, go back to chapter 8, the first few verses there. Who's in control? Again, God is. We can't fight against the king. God is, because he's under this oath to God. That's the opposite side to this. So we look at these people and we say, how can they keep gaining, right? How can the sinful keep getting away with it? Any of y'all ever thought that before? Raise of hands. Nods. Yeah. It depends on, I guess, whoever's on the TV or what television show. Ma'am? Well, since we fear God, we're going to respect the king, not fight against those things that don't matter. Why is it we don't speed? Right. Why is it we don't speed? Is it because we'll get a ticket every time we do? It's the law, right? That's what, again, there's some exceptions to that, and I'm not saying I do it all the time, but and that's the point with this. And again, it goes back to here. Yet it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before them. Even though there might be all this bad, even though there might be all of this, chaos going on that we can't control or don't have any influence over. What do you and I have? We have God, right? And who's greater than all of those things? How many instances do we have in the Old and New Testament where God's people, whether it's, as a whole, a group, or an individual, where they are standing against impossible odds, and somehow they come out ahead? How often does that happen? Can you name any instances of that happening? Just off the top of your head. You got David, Jericho. You've got the Israelites being able to escape Egypt. You have all of these instances where God's people are fighting an impossible battle, and they win. How does that happen? Where does that strength and power come from? Definitely not me, right? It's not us as human beings, but it's the fact that we're standing on the side that can't be beaten. We're standing for those, standing on the side that created the world, that has power over everything. Verse 13 now, but it will not be well for the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. How long is a shadow? Anybody have an answer? How long is a shadow? The answer is it doesn't have a length, right? It depends on where the light is. It depends on where the object is, where they are in relation to each other. But if you think about it, as the day progresses, what happens to a shadow? Well, it slowly gets longer, right? Or at least that's the image, that it just stretches and stretches and goes forever. Is that the way that human beings are going to be with life? Are we going to just keep it? Are we going to be able to just keep on hanging on to life? Hanging on to this world? And we can't just keep hanging on to the physical. It's eventually going to fade away. It's going to end. Because he does not fear before God. It's easy to become discouraged or disheartened when we look around and see sin just occurring, right? Think of a moment where you have maybe had that very same thought, where you were watching the news, or you read an article, or something scrolled through and read, and you just thought, man, how can that be happening? All right? We've all had that feeling. We all understand that. But again, that's us recognizing I have no power over this. I have no way to change this, but I do have a God that's in control of this. All right, let's move on to verses 14 and 15 now. All right, it says, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. And there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. Now, anybody want to explain what are those phrases saying? What's happening to the righteous? Somebody said, what? All right, we have the righteous people. Those are God's people. Those are the ones that are striving to serve God, to live by His wisdom. And we have the wicked people. So who would that be? If we have God's people, the wicked are going to be everybody else, right? So we have the righteous, we have the wicked. What are the deeds of the righteous people? All right. How does the New Testament phrase it? You shall know them by what? Their works. You're going to be able to look at them, what they do, what they say, how they talk, how they carry themselves, and say, this person is this. So the righteous person, now remember we said, go back to the end of chapter 7, that last verse. It says, see, this alone I found, that God made man what? Upright. How is uprightness, how is righteousness found or defined? Again, it's not by us or what we figure out or what we decide on, but it's by whatever God has said. Whatever command or whatever instruction for whatever part of life we're going through, right? That's where righteousness comes from. So, the righteous people, to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. Why do the righteous suffer? Why do God's people have to go through the trouble, the difficulty of life? You have anybody you can think of in your mind where you said, God, why that person? you think about a man, what it talks about him, how it describes him before that, about how he offered these sacrifices to God, about how he strove to make sure that there was no sin in his family. And then all of that trouble and distress and destruction happens to him. Why? All right. Can we think about anybody in maybe our own lives that maybe would fit that? I have some people in mind that are some of the most upright and honest and sincere Christians. And it seems like some of them seem to come down with the worst diseases, right? But you know what I've heard out of most of those? Only because I haven't asked them this question or heard this response. But most people say, why me? When they're given especially bad news about themselves, right? Think of Job. Wouldn't we think, God, why me does all this happen to me? The righteous have to deal with the deeds of the wicked. We're going to have trouble. We're going to have distress. We're going to lose family members. We're going to be laid off from jobs. We're going to have kids that are acting up or family that is causing problems. We're going to have that. But what do we also have? We have Jesus. We have a Savior. We have an end or that tunnel, or not tunnel, light to guide us through, or that hope to make it through those things. The second half of that, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. Again, why are there evil people in our world today that are prospering and growing and gaining, and they don't seem to have any trouble and distress? Why is Satan going to go after them, right? Why is he going to? Yeah. Well, it's that idea of, if I see them prospering and they're not suffering for what they're doing, maybe I should be involved in it, right? Or maybe that's the path I should follow. That's the idea with it. Sir. Oh, yeah. Morals and ethics don't matter, and I'm just going to get whatever I need. Because they don't fear God, they maybe approach life a great deal different. Here's the best response. Here's the best response, or the best that thought put in a nugget, and that is, why would Satan waste his time on people he already has? The people in the world that are prospering, that are growing, Satan doesn't have to waste his time on them because he's already got them. Who's he after? You and me that are striving to fear God, that are trying to figure out, what does this life mean? Why am I here? Why am I going through the problems and distresses that I'm facing? Because that's what life is. We live and then we die, right? But it's how we approach those difficulties. It's how we deal with them. Who do we trust in those situations? Again, it's all vanity anyway, right? Whether you like this sports team or that sports team, or whether you like hunting or fishing better, or whether you'd rather sit at home and eat your dinner, or whether you'd go out on the town and have everybody there with you. Those things don't matter, right? But what matters is, am I doing what I need to stand upright before God? Vanity of vanity. Ma'am. All right, and then goes into the idea of the sparrows or the birds don't gather. Again, we recognize that we face these things. We recognize that life is full of joy and greatness and beauty and pleasure, but it's also got the negative to that, right? It's got sorrow and pain and difficulty, and so through all of these things, we trust that God is in control. Now, let's very quickly, let's try to get the last few verses of this, because it kind of wraps it up better than I guess I could have done myself. All right, let's do 16, or excuse me, I don't think we did 15. It says, "And I commend joy, for a man has nothing better under the sun, but to eat, drink, be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun." So, again, in the face of knowing that bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, what do you and I do? What is the recommendation from the wisest and greatest king, human king? All right. Eat and drink. How do you say it, Barry? Carry on. I like that. I think the phrase that I've been reading a lot is "it is what it is." Y'all heard that? I will say it becomes annoying when my kids say it so many times, but it fits, right? We look at the problem, we accept it, it is what it is, and we go on and carry ourselves in the way we need to. All right, verses 16 and 17 now. It says, "And when I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night does one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the works of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. How much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out." Now, with verse 16, I guess it was because I was reading this when I was watching TV, but a commercial came on about this. I guess it's this lady that's trading stocks, and she's sitting at her kitchen table, and her kids are all there, and they're like, "Mom, you need to eat with us. You know, it's trading's over. It's ended for the day." And she says something about how options never end. There's some trading thing that she can keep doing. And her mindset, she can always keep working, right? There's never a way to cut it off. You can always keep doing something. How much effort can we put into our physical works? Again, how many of you are going to have to eat tomorrow? Our houses, our cars. Any of you need work done in your houses? Any light switches maybe that are... I've stopped asking my wife. I finally started telling her, y'all are going to have to... I am trusting y'all, because I'm telling y'all some things and she's not here, but I've just stopped asking her and telling her, just write out the list and then I'll take care of it. But she hasn't done it, so I guess I'm okay for now. But, you know, our houses, there's always something to be done, right? There's always grass to be cut, weeds to be pulled. There's always work to be done, right? And we can be really busy working, but not working and doing the right things, or the things that should matter to us. I think it's the next chapter that talks about the idea of, the end of chapter 9. I'll encourage y'all, go ahead and read that, 7 through 10. It deals with this idea of you're going to pursue the things you love in life. There are many things that I have that I started as a hobby, that I have a box at home of a half-finished project. Any of y'all have that? Right. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a boat, maybe it's whatever, right? We have these ideas, these projects, these things we want to pursue, but we never get around to them. Now, how does that relate to God? We have these ideas, this mindset of, I want to serve Him, I want to do what's right for God, I want to be righteous, I want to love God and love Him right, but then I've got to do the right things, right? If you love me, what? Keep my what? Commandments. Jesus, pretty clear on that. It's this idea that we've got to make sure that we're putting God first, that that it's not about us or what we want or about our way or God, if you don't give me this, maybe this example will help you get the idea that I'm seeing in my head. I had a friend when I was growing up that he was in where I was standing in life, he was well off. And for some reason, he thought it would be acceptable to tell me, he said he was telling me he was praying for a better car. Some friend or family member of his had gotten a brand new vehicle, and he was saying, I'm just praying that God will give me a better vehicle than him, or some phrasing of that. And I'd already thought in my head before he had said that I would love to have the truck that he had. I think it had a broken tail light or a window that didn't go up or something like that. But his thought was, it's not as good as what I want, so God better give it to me. Or I deserve it because I'm a Christian or because I'm praying to God for it. It's this mindset of very opposite of what Job had, right? Job was a righteous man, a blameless man, and what happened to him? He lost it all. Life is life. Things will happen, days will be good, days will be bad, but what do? We serve God, we keep His commandments, right? We fear Him. Again, well, it's the idea of contentment, right? What's going to happen to that brand new house? It's eventually going to have to be worked on, right? The plumbing's going to fix. What's going to happen to that brand new car? What's going to happen to that brand new boat? And talking about some of the renovations that they're looking at doing with the building here. Some of them look good, but what's going to happen to it eventually? This building was new one time, right? At some point, Barry. Maury, right? The building was new here. Exactly. And that's the point with this. Life is vanity. But the next chapter.
Job went through all that though, and didn't God bless him with more after he went through all that and still right?
Exactly. That's the point. Because of how he dealt with himself, how he was still faithful to God through those trials, we see him rewarded at the end. Now, it might not be a physical reward, right? We might go through this life destitute and penniless. But if I have God, then I've got a reward better than anything here. All right, appreciate your time and attention. We'll pick up with chapter 9. We'll also look back